I wasn't looking for a dog. It was just another cold, rainy evening, and I was walking home from my shift at the coffee shop. Hood up, shoes soaked, earbuds in, eyes down. That's how I like it lately. Quiet. No talking.
No surprises.
Just me and the sound of the rain. And then I saw him. At first, I thought it was a pile of garbage next to the dumpster behind the corner diner. But then the pile moved. Curled up tight, ribs showing through soaking wet fur, there was this dog. Not barking. Not growling. Just breathing. Barely. I stood there for a second, frozen. I mean, what was I supposed to do? I wasn't some animal rescuer. I could barely keep myself together most days. I didn't even have a pet dish at home, or a leash, or a clue. But then he lifted his head, slow, careful, and looked right at me. And I swear to you, in that moment, something inside me cracked open. Not in a bad way. Not like pain. More like a window that hadn't been opened in a long time. A part of me I'd buried. So I did something completely stupid. I took off my jacket, wrapped it around him, and whispered, "It's okay. You can come with me." That was the night I met Max. I thought I was saving him, but really, he was about to save me. I wasn't planning to stop. It was just one of those gray, half-forgotten evenings, the kind where the sky hangs low and the air feels heavy, like it's tired too. Rain had been falling since noon, soft and constant, soaking the sidewalks, turning everything a deeper shade of sad. I was walking home from my shift at the coffee shop, tired, hungry, and soaked through despite the old hoodie I'd pulled over my head. My shoes squished with every step. I had music in one ear and silence in the other. It was just another walk on another day. I wasn't feeling much of anything. That's when I saw it. Or him. I didn't know it was a dog at first. Just this little shape by the dumpster behind the old diner. At a glance, it looked like a soggy pile of trash bags. Nothing out of the ordinary for that corner. But then something about it shifted. Barely. Like a twitch. I slowed down. Paused. Pulled my hood back. It was a dog. Curled so tightly into himself, like he was trying to disappear. His fur was plastered to his ribs, his head resting on the concrete, eyes barely open. One paw stuck out at a weird angle, as if it had been broken a long time ago, and never quite healed. He wasn't moving, just breathing, shallow and soft. I looked around. No leash.
No collar.
No human nearby. Just me, the rain, and him. I should have kept walking. I really should have. I mean, what was I going to do? Bring a stray dog into my apartment? I could barely keep my plants alive. I didn't even have a towel big enough to dry him. What if he was sick? What if he bit me? What if I got attached? I took a step closer, anyway. "Hey," I said softly, crouching down. My voice sounded strange in the wet, empty street. "Hey there, buddy." He didn't lift his head, but his eyes found me. And I swear, those eyes, they weren't pleading or wild or scared. They were just tired, like mine. Like he'd been through something and didn't expect anything good anymore. Like he wasn't surprised to be left alone in the rain. Something tugged at my chest. I looked at my hands, empty. Then at my hoodie, soaked and useless. Then back at him, still breathing, still waiting. It hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't crying or whining. He wasn't even asking for help. But somehow I knew he needed it. I didn't plan what happened next. I just took off my hoodie, stepped closer, and knelt in front of him. He flinched, just a little, like he was expecting pain. I moved slowly, gently draping the hoodie over his back. "You're okay?" I whispered. "I'm not gonna hurt you." For a long moment, he didn't move. I thought maybe he was too weak to get up. Maybe I was too late. Then, slowly, he shifted. His body trembled as he rose to his feet, wobbly, hesitant. I stayed crouched, holding my breath. He took one shaky step toward me, then another. I didn't touch him. I just waited. When he finally pressed his wet nose to my hand, I almost cried. "Okay," I said again, more to myself this time. "Okay, come on." I stood, hoodie still wrapped around him, and walked slowly toward my apartment. He followed me. Not close, not fast, but he followed.
No barking. No lists.
Just quiet, shuffling footsteps behind mine, all the way to my door. The first thing I noticed when we got inside was how small he looked under the kitchen light. My apartment isn't big, just one bedroom, old creaky floors, a couch that's more springs than cushion. But to him, it must have felt like a whole new world. He stood just past the doorway, dripping water onto the mat, his head lowered like he was already apologizing for being here. I dropped my keys on the table and turned to look at him. We both stayed still. I didn't know what to do. I mean, there's no handbook for bringing home a half-dead stray. No emergency guide titled, "What to do when you accidentally rescue a dog on a Tuesday." I grabbed an old towel from the closet and crouched down. "Okay," I said gently. "Let's try to get you warm." He flinched when I reached toward him, just a quick recoil, like muscle memory. That told me more than words ever could. He wasn't just lost. He was hurt. Not just bones and cuts and cold paws, but inside. I waited, let him sniff the towel, watch my hands. Then, slowly, I started drying him off. I didn't force it, just small, slow motions. His fur was a mess, matted in places, sticky in others. His front leg, the one that looked twisted, trembled every time I touched it. He didn't growl. He didn't whine. He just stood there, frozen, like he was somewhere else. "You poor thing," I murmured. "What happened to you?" He didn't answer, of course, but I couldn't stop thinking it. I led him to the corner of the living room and laid a second towel on the floor. It wasn't much, but it was dry. He lowered himself onto it, slow and stiff, curling back into that same sad shape I'd found him in outside. I stood there for a while, unsure of what came next. I looked at him, then at my couch, then at the fridge. I hadn't eaten dinner. My coat was still soaked on the floor, and now I had a scared, broken dog shivering in my living room. "What am I doing?" I whispered to no one. I sat on the edge of the couch and watched him. He didn't sleep right away. He kept his eyes half open, as if expecting to be kicked out at any moment. I wanted to tell him he was safe, that he could stay, but I didn't know if I was ready for that. So I said something else. "Just for tonight, okay?" The words came out before I could stop them, like making a deal with myself. A boundary, something I could undo later. Just tonight, just a towel on the floor, just one dog in need. That's all it was. That's all I let it be. I grabbed a blanket and curled up on the couch, shoes still on, lights off. The soft sound of rain against the window filled the quiet. And under that, every now and then, I could hear his breathing. Still shallow, still uncertain. At some point in the night, I stirred from sleep and looked over. He was staring at me, not in a creepy way, not like he was waiting for something, just watching, like he was still trying to decide if I was real. I didn't say anything, just gave a tired smile and closed my eyes again. When I woke up in the morning, he was still there. The morning light was pale and weak when it crept through my window, one of those overcast mornings where the sky can't decide if it wants to stay gray or try for a little blue. I sat up slowly on the couch, groaning at the stiffness in my back and neck. My blanket had half slipped to the floor, and my shoes were still on. I looked a mess. I felt like a mess. Then I remembered him. My eyes darted to the towel in the corner. He was still there. Same position, curled into a ball. But his eyes were open now, watching me again, quiet and alert. Still here, still real. He didn't move when I sat up, didn't twitch or growl. Just kept those eyes on me, like he'd been watching all night. I wasn't sure if that made me feel comforted or guilty, or maybe both. "Morning," I said softly, voice scratchy from sleep. He blinked slowly, but didn't respond. I didn't expect him to. I stood and stretched, then padded quietly to the kitchen. I poured some water into a bowl, an old ceramic one that used to hold apples. It would do. I set it near him, a careful distance away. He didn't drink. Not yet. I opened the fridge. Not much in there. Some eggs, a half-empty milk carton, leftovers from a dinner I didn't remember eating. But tucked in the back was a cooked chicken breast I'd made 2 nights ago and forgot about. I warmed a few pieces in the microwave, then knelt near him again and gently placed a small portion on a clean plate just in front of the towel. Not too close. Close enough that he could smell it if he wanted to. He sniffed the air but didn't move. I sat across from him, legs crossed, and waited. We just stared at each other for a long time. Me, in pajamas with wild hair and worry lines. Him, still shivering slightly, watching like he was trying to read something behind my eyes. That was when it happened. He shifted slightly and lifted his head, not all the way, just enough. Then slowly, he met my gaze full on, and I froze, because it wasn't just eye contact. It was connection. There was something in his eyes, something old and heavy and familiar. He wasn't begging. He wasn't scared anymore. He was looking, really looking, like he was searching for something in me the same way I was searching in him. I felt my throat tighten, my eyes sting. I hadn't had anyone look at me like that in a long time. Not since. I swallowed hard and blinked. The moment stretched, then softened. He lowered his head and, finally, nudged the chicken with his nose. Then, with the smallest effort, he began to eat. Quietly, slowly, carefully, like he didn't want to waste it. Like he wasn't sure when he'd get to eat again. I stayed on the floor. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just watched him chew piece by piece until the plate was clean. He licked his lips and curled up again on the towel. This time, though, his body looked a little less tense. His eyes started to close. Not all the way, just enough to say, I might sleep soon. I might trust this. I exhaled. Okay, I whispered. That's good. And then, out of nowhere, a memory floated up from the quiet. My brother, Eli, sitting cross-legged in our childhood living room, showing me a picture book with a dog in it. His name's Max, he said. He's not real, but if we ever get a dog, that's what I'd name him. I hadn't thought about that moment in years. I looked over at the bundle of fur lying on my living room floor. Max, I said under my breath. His ears twitched. I blinked. Tried it again, a little louder. Max. This time he lifted his head, just slightly. I smiled, barely. A flicker. Yeah, I murmured. Max. That fits. I didn't realize I was already naming him. Didn't realize I was already keeping him. I didn't plan to go shopping that day. I wasn't even sure I should. I told myself it was just for essentials, nothing serious. Just a few things to make him comfortable. Just enough to get through one more day. But deep down, I knew. You don't walk into a pet store for just one more day. Max stayed curled on the towel as I got dressed. I peeked over my shoulder more times than I'd like to admit. He hadn't moved much, but every time I looked at him, he was watching me, eyes soft, head resting on his paws. Still wary, still quiet. Before I left, I knelt down and said, I'll be back, okay? I promise. He blinked at me. The pet store wasn't far, just a few blocks away. I kept my head low on the walk, hoping no one noticed the quiet little storm unraveling in my chest. Inside the store, the smell of hay and rawhide hit me like a wall. Shelves were packed with collars, leashes, chew toys, kibble bags taller than me. I stood there like someone who'd wandered into the wrong aisle of her own life. A teenage employee in a bright blue vest walked up, chewing gum. Can I help you find something? I nodded slowly. I think I adopted a dog last night. She grinned. Congrats. Big or small? Small, but not really. He's thin, hurt, quiet. I don't know what he eats. She led me down an aisle and helped me pick out a soft harness, wet food, a collapsible water bowl, and a fluffy, donut-shaped bed. I bought 2 chew toys even though I wasn't sure Max would ever play. Back home, I opened the door quietly. Max was still there, still in the corner. My hoodie had dried into a wrinkled, soggy mess beside him. He lifted his head when he heard me, then slowly lowered it again. Not scared, just tired. Hey, I said, placing the bag on the floor. I got you some stuff. He didn't move. I unpacked everything one by one, placing the bed in a cozy nook by the heater and pouring fresh water into the new bowl. I set the food beside it, cracked open a can of soft chicken, and filled the dish. The smell must have done something, because Max finally stirred. He stood, shakily, and made his way over. His legs wobbled, but he didn't fall. He sniffed the food for a long time before carefully eating. I didn't touch him. I just watched from the couch as he licked the bowl clean again. When he finished, he turned and limped toward the new bed. He sniffed it once. Then, like it had always been his, he curled into it and let out a long, shuddering sigh. That sound, like his whole body releasing something it had been holding for days, weeks, maybe longer, it hit me harder than I expected. I sat down beside the bed, just far enough not to crowd him. "You like it?" I whispered. His tail didn't wag, but it moved. Once. A tiny flick. I laughed, quietly. "I'll take that as a yes." The afternoon passed quietly. I read a little, made tea, watched Max sleep. Sometimes he twitched in his dreams, little jerks like someone bracing for impact. I knew that feeling all too well. When evening came, I moved the bed closer to the couch and turned on a lamp. Max lifted his head to follow the motion, then relaxed again. It was the first time he didn't flinch. That night, I left the bathroom door open while I brushed my teeth, just in case he wanted to know I was still there. And when I returned, I found him not on the towel, not even on his bed, but curled up right next to the couch, closer than he'd ever come. His eyes fluttered open when I knelt beside him, but he didn't move away. I reached out, slowly, and gently ran my hand down his back. He didn't flinch, didn't freeze. He leaned in just barely, and I knew, without speaking a word, that he was trying to believe this place was different, trying to trust me, trying to stay. The rain came back that night, soft at first, barely a whisper against the windows, then heavier, a slow, steady rhythm on the glass, like the sky was rocking the world to sleep. I turned off the overhead lights and left just one lamp on in the corner. Its warm yellow glow softened everything, the edges of the furniture, the shadows in the hall, the fear in Max's eyes. He was still curled up beside the couch, resting his head on his front paws. He didn't look scared anymore. Not really. Just tired. That kind of deep, bone-deep tired you feel when your body finally believes it can stop fighting. I sat cross-legged near him on the floor, just close enough for him to know I was there. I didn't reach out this time. He'd already made the first move. Now it was my turn to give him space. "I used to hate rain," I murmured, not expecting a response. Always reminded me of hospital waiting rooms.
Vetshush.
Bad coffee. Max didn't move, but his ear twitched like he was listening. But now, I think I don't mind it so much. Not tonight, anyway. The room was quiet again, just the sound of rain. And breathing. I watched Max for a while. His breathing had slowed, evened out. His body rose and fell with every inhale, every exhale, like a tide.
Steady. Calm.
Eventually, I stood up, stretched, and turned off the last lamp. The room dimmed, and for a moment, I stood still in the dark, letting my eyes adjust. I could just barely make out his shape, a small curled silhouette against the pale of the new bed. I slipped into my own bed a few minutes later, pulling the blanket around me. My body was tired, but my mind buzzed with quiet thoughts. What was his story? Where had he come from? How long had he been out there, waiting for someone to notice?
I didn't know.
Maybe I'd never know. But for now, he was safe. Here.
Dry. Warm.
And somehow, so was I. That realization crept into my chest like the first sip of hot tea on a cold day. Surprising, but soothing. Something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Safe. It had been a while. I turned on my side and let the sound of rain and Max's soft breathing lull me into sleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I stirred. Half asleep, I reached out toward the edge of the bed, maybe out of habit, maybe just to feel the room around me, and my fingers brushed against something soft. Fur. Max had moved. He was sleeping beside the bed now, his body pressed gently against the frame, like he'd gotten up quietly in the night and decided this was closer, safer. I didn't move,
Didn't speak.
just smiled into the darkness. That small shift, him choosing to come closer, it felt bigger than anything else that had happened all day. It felt like trust. I let my fingers rest there a moment longer, then pulled them back, careful not to wake him. When I finally drifted off again, it wasn't the tired, heavy sleep I'd been used to. It was light,
Soft. Real.
the kind of sleep that comes when you've stopped holding your breath. The smell of wet fur hit me the second I opened my eyes. It wasn't exactly pleasant. It was kind of sharp and earthy, like damp laundry and dog breath and something slightly unwashed. But strangely, I didn't mind. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face. My bedroom was still dark, lit only by the gray wash of cloudy morning. Rain tapped lightly on the window again. Always the rain lately. I rolled over and looked down at the floor beside my bed. Max was there, curled tightly, tail over his nose, fast asleep. The sight made my chest ache a little. I lay back down and stared at the ceiling for a while. I should be making a plan, I thought. What to do next? Where to take him? He can't stay here forever. He's probably someone else's dog. Or he needs more than I can give.
Or,
But the truth was, none of that felt real. It was just noise in my head. Empty excuses to cover up the truth that was already forming like dew. I didn't want him to leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I got up quietly, careful not to wake him, and padded into the kitchen. Coffee first. Always coffee. I stood at the counter in my old t-shirt, waiting for it to brew, listening to the soft gurgle of the machine and the steady rain outside. I glanced over my shoulder. Still asleep. It hit me then, how quickly he had become a part of the room. Like a piece of furniture I never realized I needed. I poured myself a mug and sat on the floor again, this time a little closer to him. After a few minutes, he stirred. His ears twitched. His eyes opened.
he looked at me. Morning, I said.
He blinked and slowly raised his head, his paws stretched out in front of him. Then, without warning, he gave the smallest yawn, long and silent, like he was testing what it felt like to be comfortable. And for the first time, his tail tapped the floor. Once.
Twice.
Not wagging, just a soft, unsure flicker. But it was something. Look at you, I said quietly, smiling. You're getting brave. I stood up, set my coffee on the table, and opened the fridge again. I'd forgotten to buy more food for him. Only one can left. He watched as I grabbed it and opened it, the soft pop of the lid making him flinch slightly. But he didn't back away. I filled the same plate, added fresh water to his bowl, and stepped back. He didn't need an invitation this time. He walked straight to it and ate.
No hesitación.
Something warm and strange fluttered in my chest. It felt good to take care of something again. It felt like purpose. When he was done, he sniffed around the room a little, still slow, still limping but exploring now. He walked past the couch, past the corner chair, and paused at the window. I followed his gaze. Outside, a bird landed on the railing of the fire escape. Max stared at it, tail low but steady, ears perked. You like birds? I asked. He didn't look at me, but he didn't need to. I could see the focus in him, the curiosity. He was coming back to life, one sense at a time. I sat on the couch and pulled my knees up, watching him watch the world. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't leaving today. I didn't care what the rules were. Not yet. Not now. Maybe later. Maybe never. It wasn't until the third time Max got up to explore that I really noticed the limp. He had moved slowly since the start, cautious, unsure. But now, in the quiet rhythm of the morning, with no panic clouding my thoughts, I saw it clearly. His front left leg dragged slightly. Each step seemed to cost him something, like the limb just didn't want to obey anymore. He didn't make a sound.
No whine, no yell.
Just that soft, uneven shuffle across my old hardwood floors. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, heart tightening. He paused by the couch and sat down with a low sigh. It looked like it hurt just to bend. I wanted to reach for him, to kneel beside him and see what was wrong, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat on the arm of the couch and just waited. He looked up at me, head tilted slightly, those tired brown eyes meeting mine.
No fear this time.
Just honesty, like he knew I'd seen it. I saw, I said softly. Your leg. Does it hurt? He didn't look away, didn't flinch, but he didn't answer either. He couldn't. I lowered myself to the floor and crossed my legs, staying just a few feet away. Gave him space to choose. I want to help, I added, but I don't know how. His eyes dropped, and he curled himself up slowly, resting his chin on his good paw. It looked like he was saying it's okay. I'm used to it, and I hated that. I hated that this sweet, quiet soul had learned to live with pain, that he walked like that was normal, that no one had done anything to stop it until now. I reached for my phone and Googled local vets. A dozen names popped up, most with smiling cartoon pets in their logos, cheerful names like Happy Paws and Dr. Barkley's. I picked the closest one with good reviews and dialed. Hi, I said, clearing my throat. I found a dog. Stray, I think. He's limping and seems like he's been hurt. The receptionist was warm, thankfully. She asked a few questions and said I could bring him in that afternoon. I hung up and looked at Max. He was already asleep again. I chewed my lip and stared at him, taking in every detail now. His fur was patchy in spots, thinner near his hind legs, like it had been rubbed or pulled out. There were tiny pink lines along his ribs. Scars. Old ones. He didn't just get lost. Someone had failed him. Or worse. And somehow he'd survived. It felt strange, realizing that he'd walked through something terrible, that he was carrying it with him every second, and yet here he was, sleeping in my apartment, eating chicken from a mismatched plate, learning to wag his tail. He was wounded, sure, but he wasn't gone. I knew a little about that feeling, carrying invisible weight, moving through the world like nothing hurt even when everything did, pretending to be fine so no one would ask. I got it. I really did. I sat beside him and let my fingers hover above his head, just a few inches from his fur. Close, but not touching. Not yet. You're not broken, I whispered. Not really, just bruised. He stirred, lifting his head again, and I saw it then, just a flicker. Trust. Not full, not easy, but it was there. A little ember, glowing soft and real. It was enough. Getting Max into a car was harder than I thought it would be. It wasn't because he fought me. He didn't growl or snap or even pull away. He just froze. Completely. Like the idea of being lifted or moved triggered something too big to understand. I sat beside him on the floor for a while, holding the soft harness I'd bought the day before. It's okay, I told him, gently slipping it over his head. I'll be with you the whole time. It took some coaxing. Bits of chicken, a soft blanket, lots of soft words. Eventually, he let me guide him out the door and down the steps of the building, one slow step at a time. It was like walking with someone who'd forgotten how to trust the ground. When we got to the street, I opened the passenger door and laid the blanket across the seat. Max hesitated, staring up at the car like it might swallow him whole. I knelt beside him. We're just going to the vet.
No calles.
No shelters. Just someone who'll take a look and help your leg, okay? He didn't answer, obviously, but after a long pause, he made a decision. One quiet, brave decision. He climbed in. I closed the door, slid into the driver's seat, and exhaled. The drive was short, just 10 minutes, but it felt longer. Max sat low, his body tense, eyes darting to every noise. I kept talking, soft, steady chatter to fill the silence. Almost there. I hate vet offices too. Fluorescent lights, weird smells, too many clipboards. But we'll be in and out, all right. He didn't relax, but he didn't panic. And honestly, that felt like a win. The clinic was tucked on the corner of a quiet street. Brick building, faded teal trim, a little sign out front with a cartoon dog wagging its tail. The parking lot was half empty, which helped. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and treats. A cat meowed from its carrier. Somewhere in the back, a dog barked once and was shushed. Max hesitated at the doorway. I crouched down and whispered, "You're doing amazing, okay?" We walked in together. The receptionist looked up and smiled warmly. "You must be Lily." "Yeah," I said, a little breathless. "This is Max." Max stayed close to my leg, eyes wide, head low. I gave his leash a gentle squeeze. "He's limping pretty badly," I added. "And I think he's been through something." She nodded. "We'll take good care of him." We didn't wait long. The vet, Dr. Reyes, was a calm, middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a soft voice. She knelt down the second we entered the room and let Max come to her. He didn't at first, but after a few quiet minutes, he stepped forward and sniffed her hand. "Well done, buddy," she said. "You're a brave one, aren't you?" She examined him gently, talking the whole time. Max flinched when she touched his leg. She frowned. "Old fracture," she murmured. "Didn't heal right. Probably wasn't set properly." My stomach twisted. "Can it be fixed?" "We can manage it. It's healed enough that surgery's risky and probably unnecessary. But we can ease the pain. Gentle exercise, anti-inflammatory meds, maybe hydrotherapy later. He'll always have a bit of a limp, though."
Inudet, blinking fast.
"And these scars?" I asked softly. She hesitated. Hard to say. Could be neglect. Could be worse. She didn't have to say the word abuse. It sat there anyway, thick in the silence. Max looked at me suddenly, those eyes again.
Soft.
Watchful. Waiting. I reached out, placed a hand on his back. "You're safe now," I said. And for the first time since we met, Max leaned into my touch. Not just a little. Fully. Deliberately. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't make anyone in the room gasp. But it mattered. More than anything else that day. After the vet visit, we returned home slowly. The car ride back was quiet, a silence filled with soft thoughts and quiet promises that things might start feeling better. Max sat near my feet, head resting on his paws, his gentle breathing a steady rhythm against the quiet hum of the engine. When we reached my apartment, I helped Max out of the car with a softness in my step. I carried his little blanket to the front door as if I were showing him something precious. Inside, the familiar scent of old wood and warm tea welcomed us. But tonight, it felt different. It felt like it was meant for both of us. For the first hour, Max lingered on the threshold. I watched him from behind the doorframe, feeling his gaze on every corner of the living room, as if he were memorizing each detail. Slowly, he stepped further in, sniffing at the rug where the rain had muddied tracks and gently testing the new bed I'd set up in the corner. I decided to give him space. I settled in the kitchen with a cup of tea, keeping the door slightly ajar. I listened to the soft sounds of him exploring. There was a hesitance in every move, yet a quiet determination in his eyes. With each careful sniff, he was learning the contours of this new home. And I, too, was beginning to see the apartment in a different light, a place where maybe, just maybe, we could both belong. Later that evening, I found Max curled up near the window, his head resting against the sill. The gentle amber of the streetlights spilled through the window, mingling with his soft fur. I sat on the couch just a few feet away, silently offering my presence. It wasn't about forcing him to feel safe. It was about letting him know I'd be here no matter what. At some point, Max raised his head and slowly looked in my direction. Our eyes met, a wordless conversation filled with quiet understanding. There was a spark in those eyes that said, "I'm ready." Although his tail barely gave a little twitch as I shifted closer, I knew a boundary had been crossed. He was starting to see the space as his own, and I was accepting that he was now part of mine. I got up, walked over, and knelt down beside him. "You're here now, Max," I whispered, running my fingers gently along the back of his neck. He didn't flinch. Instead, he looked at me, almost as if he was thanking me for the gentle care, for not pushing him away or rushing him. I sat there a while longer, stroking his fur slowly. I remembered how scared and broken he had looked when I first brought him home. And now, as he let my hand rest softly on him, it felt like a quiet promise was being exchanged between us. I had promised him safety when I wrapped him in that old hoodie on the rain-soaked street. Now, he was showing me that trust wasn't a sudden burst. It was built slowly, one small gesture at a time. That night, I found myself speaking softly to him as I tidied up a little. "This place isn't just mine anymore, is it?" I said with a half smile. "It's ours." In the low light and soft hum of a quiet evening, it wasn't just a thought. It was a truth. Max's eyes followed me as I moved from room to room. He did not bark or run away. Instead, he came closer, as if every step told him, "I'm learning, and I belong here." I prepared his food, fresh water, and arranged his little bed with care. Each act of care was a subtle way of welcoming him fully. It was my way of embracing the idea that he was no longer a stranger in my life. Later, when I sat down to read a book in the living room, I noticed Max quietly settling at my feet. He looked up occasionally, his eyes soft and calm. I paused in my reading, feeling the weight of the moment, and looked down at him. And in that pause, in that shared silence between us, I realized that the apartment, once just my quiet, lonely space, had transformed into a haven for us both. In that moment, I understood that trust wasn't something to be demanded or hurried. It was given slowly, through each shared look, each tender touch, each quiet moment of togetherness. And as I watched Max, comfortably resting his head against my foot, I knew deep in my heart that he had finally made this place his home too. It started with a smell, faint at first, something burnt and bitter creeping in through the window above the sink. I paused mid-dish, water running, sponge in hand. My nose twitched. Toast?
No.
Not my kitchen. I turned off the faucet and walked to the window. Outside, the alley was bathed in orange light. Then I heard it, distant shouting, the unmistakable crackle of something devouring dry wood. Then sirens. My stomach dropped. I spun toward the living room. Max was standing now, alert and tense, eyes wide. He'd heard it too. "Okay, buddy," I said, grabbing my phone and coat. "Something's happening. We're gonna stay calm." I stepped into the hallway and opened the apartment door. The air hit me like a wave. Heat, smoke, a smell that stuck to your skin. People were talking on the stairwell below. Panicked voices, doors slamming, footsteps racing. I ducked back inside. "It's close," I said aloud, grabbing Max's leash and snapping it onto his harness. He was trembling already, tail tucked tight, his whole body leaning backward like he wanted to hide under the bed. "I know, baby. I know," I whispered, kneeling down to his level. "But we have to go. You're safe with me, okay? I'm not leaving you." He didn't move. I looked at him, and something in me shifted. There was no choice here. Not anymore. This wasn't a favor or a temporary rescue. This was my dog. My responsibility. My heart. I scooped him up. He was heavier than he looked. Bony still, but solid. I wrapped the blanket around him, covered his nose, and ran. The stairwell was chaos. Voices. Heat. My feet hit the steps hard, heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't see the flames, but I could feel the fear in everyone's faces. A fire had broken out in the building next door. The smoke was drifting over, thick and mean. Outside, the street was full of neighbors and flashing lights. Firefighters moved like shadows against the glowing haze. I found a spot across the street and crouched beside Max, still wrapped in the blanket, holding him tight. He was shaking hard. I pressed my forehead against his. "It's okay. We're okay. We're not going back inside tonight, but we're okay." Someone handed me a bottle of water. Someone else offered their jacket. People moved around us, talking, comforting, panicking, but in that moment, all I could see was Max. And he was looking back at me, not terrified, not trying to run, just watching me. His eyes said it clearly. "If you're here, I'm okay." That was the moment I felt it, deep and quiet and certain. He trusted me, not because I rescued him, but because I stayed. An hour passed before the fire was declared under control. It hadn't reached our building, just smoke damage. Still, the fire chief told us to find somewhere else for the night. I texted my friend Jane, who lived 2 blocks over. She didn't ask questions, just said, "Come, bring him too." We walked slowly, Max back on his leash now. His steps were still uneven, but he stayed close. Every so often, he looked up at me like he was checking to make sure I was still real. At Jane's apartment, she gave us the guest room and a fluffy blanket. Max curled up on the bed instantly, his eyes half lidded with exhaustion. "You okay?" Jane whispered at the door. I nodded, blinking hard.
Yeah.
Just scared me. I didn't tell her how much. I didn't tell her how fast I'd thought I might lose everything, or how the only thing I grabbed was Max. That night, as I lay on the edge of the guest bed, Max scooted closer. He rested his head on my thigh, sighed deeply, and finally, closed his eyes. And as the last flicker of adrenaline faded, something clicked into place. This dog wasn't temporary. This wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about love. 3 days after the fire, we settled into something that felt like a rhythm. Max woke up with the light now, not panicked or pacing, just stretching, yawning, blinking into the soft morning like he belonged here. And maybe he did. I'd moved his bed beside mine. I think we both slept better knowing the other was close. His limp was less pronounced now with the meds. He still walked carefully, but not like he was bracing for pain anymore. He even wagged his tail when I came back from the grocery store yesterday, just once, but it was full and genuine, like he was the one welcoming me home. That morning, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, sipping coffee while Max sniffed around his food bowl. The window was open just a crack, letting in the scent of last night's rain. Everything felt still. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on the door.
Max Franche.
My hand stiffened around the mug. Nobody knocked here. Not without calling first. Not this early. I set the cup down quietly and walked to the door, heart picking up speed. I peeked through the peephole. A man stood there. Mid-50s, maybe. Baseball cap pulled low. Windbreaker zipped up to his neck. He looked tired. His eyes were the kind you remember. Deep-set, gray-blue. Maybe kind once, but worn now. He didn't look threatening, but he didn't smile either. I opened the door an inch. The chain still latched. "Can I help you?" He nodded slowly. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. I think you might have my dog." My stomach dropped. Behind me, Max padded quietly into view. The man's eyes locked onto him. "I saw the flyer at the clinic," he said. "That scar on his right leg, it's the same." I stepped back instinctively. Max isn't chipped. He didn't have a collar. He was starving, scared, limping like someone left him out in the rain. His jaw tightened. "I didn't leave him," he said. "He got out during a storm. I've been looking." Max was watching him now, head slightly tilted, ears twitching, body still. "His name's not Max," the man said, softer. "It's Buddy."
Buddy.
I hated how easily it rolled off his tongue. Like it fit. Like it was true. The man pulled out his phone and showed me a picture, blurry, a little old. But there he was. My Max sitting in a field beside a girl, and this man. Tail up, eyes happy. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, then closed. Max, Buddy. Took a step forward. Sniffed the air. Then he stopped. He didn't run to the man. Didn't wag. He just stared, as if trying to remember something that used to matter. The man's voice broke a little. He was my daughter's dog. She passed a year ago. I think he never really recovered. I swallowed hard. Neither did you. He nodded once, silent. I looked down at Max.
He looked at me.
I knelt beside him, touching his side. "Is this him?" I whispered. "Was he yours?" Max didn't move. The man crouched slowly. "Hey, boy," he murmured. "Hey, buddy. You remember me?" Still nothing. Just silence. A strange, heavy kind. Then Max leaned, barely, into me. My hand tightened on his fur. "I'm not trying to take him away," the man said gently. I had to see if it was him." I nodded. "I understand." We stood there for a long second, all 3 of us in the doorway, with years of pain between us. Then the man did something I didn't expect. He stood up, gave Max one last look, and smiled, a tired, grateful kind of smile. "Looks like he chose," he said. "Take good care of him." He turned and walked away. And just like that, the past let go. Max didn't bark. He didn't chase. He just turned, walked back inside, and lay down by the window. I closed the door and slid to the floor beside him.
Much, he whispered.
He wagged his tail once. The apartment felt different after the man left. Not loud, not heavy, just quiet in a way I hadn't expected, like the air itself was thinking. Max, buddy, lay curled by the window, his head resting on the sill, eyes half closed. The tension from earlier had faded, but something lingered in his posture. Not fear, exactly.
Just stillness.
The kind that comes when your world has shifted, even just a little. I sat down on the couch, a blanket around my shoulders, coffee long gone cold beside me. My mind wouldn't stop circling the conversation. His name's not Max. It's Buddy. I said the name out loud. Buddy. Max didn't respond.
Much.
His ear twitched. Something about that felt bigger than it should. I watched him closely, trying to piece things together like a jigsaw with missing edges.
Who had he been before me?
Had he lived in a warm home? Had he slept beside someone else? Wagged his tail at another door? Had someone loved him once, and then lost him? I thought about the picture. The little girl, the man, the dog. A family, captured in a moment before everything went wrong. There had been love there. I could see it in the way Max. No, he was sitting. Upright. Alert.
Alive.
But then something broke. Storms came. People left. And the dog, who once belonged, became the dog no one claimed. Until me. I looked around my living room.
His bowl by the wall.
His new bed under the heater. My hoodie still draped over the chair, the one I'd wrapped him in the first night. All small signs of the quiet, ordinary life we were building together. He wasn't just passing through anymore.
This was his home now.
And somehow, I needed that to be true as much as he did. I got up, walked over, and sat on the floor beside him. He lifted his head just a little, then rested it again. I gently reached out and stroked behind his ear. You had a life before me, I whispered. I don't know what happened. I'm sorry for the pain, but you're here now. He shifted slightly, eyes opening, watching me. Do you want to be Max? I asked. No answer, obviously, but he didn't pull away. And then, slowly, with a small, quiet sigh, he rested his chin on my thigh. I smiled through a prickling in my eyes. You're not someone's lost dog anymore, I said. You're mine, and I'm yours, if that's okay. His tail moved once. Just once. I took that as yes. That afternoon, I found the old flyer from the vet clinic still stuffed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out and stared at the photo, the same one the man had shown me. The girl, the field, the dog that once had a home. Then I folded it in half and placed it gently in a drawer. Not to forget, but to rest. Later, I updated the contact form at the clinic just in case. I wrote, adopted dog, possibly named Buddy in previous home. Now called Max Limps from past injury. In recovery. Found a new forever home. And under owner. Lily, his person. That night, Max and I sat on the couch together, curled under the same blanket. He didn't pull away when I leaned against him. In fact, he let out a sound. Something between a sigh and a low, tired groan. The kind of sound you make when you're not scared of tomorrow anymore. I kissed the top of his head. You're not what I expected, I whispered. But you're exactly what I needed. And in the quiet, where names don't matter and memories fade soft, Max fell asleep with his head in my lap, right where he belonged. It started with a magnet shaped like a banana. I found it in the junk drawer one morning, wedged between expired coupons and old takeout menus. I smiled, rinsed it off, and slapped it onto the fridge just for fun. Max blinked at the sound. You don't like bananas, I told him as he watched me from the doorway. But this guy's staying. The kitchen still smelled like toast and scrambled eggs. I'd made extra, just in case he got curious, though he hadn't ventured close enough to try. He sat near the threshold like always, watching but keeping a respectful distance from the stove and the noise. I liked that about him. He had boundaries, but also he stayed close. I stood in front of the fridge, chewing my last bite of toast, and stared at the blank notepad next to the banana magnet. I hadn't used that pad in months. It still had the first page scribbled with milk, soap, something for dinner maybe. I ripped that off and grabbed a pen. Without overthinking it, I wrote, Max's first tail wag, October 9th. I stared at it. It looked silly, hanging there alone. Just one small moment, one flick of fur. But it wasn't just a tail wag. It was the first one. The first time he trusted me enough to show happiness. And somehow, I didn't want to forget that. A few hours later, I added another. First time he didn't flinch at a sudden noise, October 10th. The next morning, I caught him sniffing the edge of the couch where I dropped a piece of chicken. He licked the fabric tentatively, then looked at me like he expected to get scolded. I just laughed and handed him a real piece. First couch crime, October 11th. By the end of the week, the list had grown. First time, he napped in the sunspot by the window. First tail chase, awkward, slow, but adorable. First time he barked a single confused woof at the mailman. First time he rolled on his back and let me rub his belly. First time he brought me a sock from who knows where. Each one felt small on its own. Ordinary. But together, they started to build something. A life. Our life. Max didn't understand the list, obviously. But I think he sensed something every time I walked over and wrote another line. He'd wag or tilt his head or shuffle closer like he knew, somehow, that we were marking progress. One night, while brushing my teeth, I caught a glimpse of the fridge from the bathroom mirror. The list stood out even from across the room. Dozens of scribbled little victories stuck to the metal like love notes. I dried my hands and walked over. Max was asleep on the rug, curled up the way he always did, nose tucked under tail, paws crossed just slightly. He snored now and then, which always made me smile. I reached for the pen and added. First snore loud enough to scare himself, October 14th. I looked at the paper for a long second, then wrote one more. First night, I realized I wasn't alone anymore, October 7th. I hadn't said it out loud yet. Hadn't even fully let myself believe it. But somewhere between that first wag and that first bark, something shifted in me, too. I wasn't just taking care of a dog. I was healing alongside him. The days weren't quiet anymore. They were filled with the soft rhythms of bowls being filled, walks being taken, socks being stolen, and one brave dog learning to trust in small doses. The fridge became our little altar of memory, and every scribbled note was a prayer of gratitude. I kissed Max on the head that night as I turned off the lights. Tomorrow, I whispered, I think we'll try the park. It was a crisp Saturday morning when I finally said it out loud. We're going to the park. Max blinked at me from his blanket nest, one ear tilted sideways like he wasn't sure what a park was, but it definitely sounded suspicious. You'll love it, I promised. There's grass and trees and squirrels that'll drive you nuts. He didn't move. His tail didn't even flick. I walked to the front closet and grabbed the leash. That got his attention. Still, as I knelt to clip the leash onto his harness, I noticed the stiffness in his body. His paws shifted. His eyes darted to the door, then to me, then back again. He wasn't sure if this meant fun or danger. It's just us, I whispered, giving him a soft pat. We're not going far, and we'll come home right after. I packed water and a soft towel in my tote bag, tossed in a packet of treats, and locked up behind us. Outside, the air smelled like fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. A dog barked from a nearby balcony. Max paused mid-step, his body tensing again, but didn't stop. He walked beside me, slow but steady. The park was only 4 blocks away, tucked between rows of brick townhomes and an old church. It wasn't anything special, no fountains or sculptures. Just grass, benches, and tall trees that dropped leaves like golden confetti. As we turned onto the path, Max stopped. I looked down. His eyes were wide. Not panicked, just unsure. So I crouched beside him. Want to go back? He didn't move. Want to keep going? He looked at the open grass ahead of us, then took a single step forward. I didn't cheer or coax. I just stood up and walked slowly, letting the leash stay loose. and after a few seconds, he followed. The moment we reached the clearing, I felt it, a little shift in the leash, a lighter step, a tiny lift in his tail. I looked down.
Max was sniffing.
His nose was in the grass, tail swaying ever so slightly. Every new smell seemed to tug him forward another inch. He sniffed a patch of leaves like they held ancient secrets. He investigated a fallen stick like it was made of magic. Then he did something that stopped me cold. He looked back at me, not to check if I was still there, but to invite me in, like he was saying, "Come on, you've got to smell this." I sat on a bench nearby and let him roam the length of the leash. It wasn't much freedom, but it was more than he'd had since I found him. A few other dogs passed by, one large golden retriever, a yappy chihuahua in a sweater, a terrier with a human who looked just as high-strung. Max watched them all, but didn't react. He stayed close to me, circling slowly, like I was the center of his compass. When we reached the far end of the park, I found a sunny patch of grass and sat down cross-legged. Max hesitated, then slowly, deliberately, settled beside me. His body touched mine. Not a lot, just enough. I pulled out the water bottle and poured some into the collapsible bowl. He drank, then laid his head on my shoe. That was when I knew. The park wasn't a test for Max. It was a test for us, for our bond, for whether the safety we'd built inside the walls of my apartment could stretch far enough to exist out here, in the open, among strangers, under trees older than either of us could imagine. And it had, because he'd trusted me. Not completely, not forever, but enough for now. As we sat in that golden patch of morning sun, I pulled my phone from my pocket and typed out a new note for the fridge. First park trip, October 15th. And underneath it, I added, he chose to stay close. We were just about to head home when he saw her. A small white dog, fluffy, sprightly, tail curled like a question mark, bounded across the grass with a neon yellow ball in her mouth. Her leash trailed behind her like a forgotten ribbon, and her human jogged behind her laughing, calling, "Maisie, bring it here, you little thief."
Max froos beside me.
The white dog, Maisie, skidded to a stop just a few feet away from us, her ball now a gooey mess of slobber and excitement. She dropped it with a proud huff, then noticed Max. She tilted her head. He tilted his. Then she did something unexpected. She barked once, sharp, high-pitched, not aggressive, and darted a tiny circle around him. Max didn't move. Not at first. His ears perked. He took one step back, then forward, then sniffed the air like it had suddenly become more interesting. Maisie dropped into a play bow, front legs stretched, tail wagging like a metronome. Her tongue lolled out in a huge, goofy grin. Max watched her, watched the ball. Then, cautiously, in a move so slow I thought I imagined it, he took a step toward the toy. Maisie grabbed it and sprinted a wild circle around him. Max's body jerked like he wanted to follow, but didn't quite remember how. His tail lifted. Then it wagged.
Once. Twice.
My heart jumped. Maisie zipped past him again, brushing aside with a flash of fur. Max startled, then gave the smallest, most uncertain bounce I've ever seen. He half lunged, then stopped. Looked at me like, was that okay?
I smiled, blinking fast.
Yeah, I said. Go on. You're allowed. He didn't chase her. Not really. But he watched her, walked in a clumsy half circle, let himself be near the joy, even if he wasn't ready to leap into it. Maisie's owner jogged over, catching the leash and laughing. She loves making new friends. Yours is cute, Shy, huh?
Yeah, I said.
Very. She glanced at Max, looks like he's trying, though. I nodded. It's his first time seeing a toy, I think. The woman's face softened.
You're doing good, then.
Both of you. Max finally sniffed the ball when Maisie dropped it again. Just one long, curious breath before backing away. She didn't mind. She nudged it toward him with her nose and trotted back to her human, satisfied. He didn't chase, didn't bark, but he stood a little straighter, and didn't flinch when a kid rode by on a noisy scooter just a few feet away. Something was shifting. Something good. Later, when we walked back toward home, Max kept glancing behind us like He was looking for her. That happy white blur. That zooming cloud of chaos with the yellow ball. I laughed softly. "You've got a friend now, huh?" He didn't answer, obviously, but his tail wagged again. Easier this time. That night, while he slept curled beside the couch, I stood by the fridge with the marker in my hand, smiling to myself. I added. First dog encounter, October 15th.
Didn't run.
Didn't hide. Watched. Wagged. And just underneath, I scribbled. Almost played. Almost. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. I don't know exactly when it started, but one day I realized something strange. I'd started hearing Max's voice in my head. Not barking. Talking. Not out loud, of course. Not like some wild hallucination. More like, when I looked at him, I could hear what he might say if he had the words. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't happen during thunder or fire, or the quiet moments where the world held its breath. It happened while I was folding laundry. He was lying across the rug, watching me sort socks like it was the most important work on earth. And in my head, as I held up two mismatched ones, I heard, "Those aren't even close. Are you okay?" I laughed. He perked up, as if surprised I'd heard him. I kept folding, but I couldn't stop the smile on my face. I said, "Then why don't you help?" And in my head, "I am helping. I'm moral support." The words weren't fancy. Max didn't sound like a philosopher or some magical wise creature. His voice, the one I'd invented, I guess, was simple.
Warm.
A little dry. The way you'd imagine a gentle old soul trapped in a young body. That night, when I spilled a spoonful of rice while trying to multitask dinner and dishes, I muttered, "Of course," and bent down to clean it up. From the corner of the room, I heard it again. 5-second rule still counts.
Eve iten vers.
I grinned over my shoulder at him. "Yeah," I said. "You definitely have." He just blinked at me. It became a game after that. A quiet little joke between us. He didn't need to bark to say what he was thinking, I knew. Or at least I liked to pretend I did. When I came home with groceries, and he sniffed the bag with too much interest. "You forgot the chicken jerky, didn't you?" When I spilled a glass of water and groaned. "It's okay. I was thirsty anyway." When I stayed up too late scrolling on my phone, and he crawled into bed without me. "You're the one who keeps saying sleep matters. Come on." It made me realize something. I'd spent so much time trying to guess what Max had been through, what had hurt him, what he might fear. But I hadn't taken enough time to imagine what he might say now if he could. And I realized his voice in my head wasn't filled with fear. It was calm, playful, tired sometimes, but never angry. He'd been through something, yes, but maybe that wasn't all he was. Maybe that wasn't all he wanted to be. Maybe he just wanted someone to hear him, even if his words didn't sound like mine. I walked over to him that evening as he dozed in his usual spot by the window. I sat beside him and said, "If you could speak, what would you say right now?" His eyes opened slowly. He stretched his legs and let out a quiet little groan. In my head, I heard, "You talk too much, but I like the sound." I laughed softly. Then I whispered, "I'd say thank you for staying, for trusting me." He yawned, blinked, and gently rested his chin on my lap. And in that perfect silence, I heard him say, "I'd say the same thing." I wasn't even supposed to go in that day. The weather had turned sour. Wet wind, gray skies, the kind that makes your bones ache and your thoughts get loud. I'd had a bad morning. I was tired of scrolling through rescue sites that made promises they couldn't keep. Still, I walked past the shelter with my coat wrapped tight and my coffee gone cold, and I paused. Just paused. The rain tapped at the awning like fingers. There was a flyer on the door about a bake sale. I don't even like cookies. But I went in. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fate. Maybe I just didn't want to go home to my empty apartment. The air inside smelled like bleach and damp fur. A woman at the desk looked up with tired eyes, but a warm smile. "Just looking?" she asked. I nodded. She handed me a visitor badge and gestured to the hallway. Back rose the quiet ones.
I didn't know what she meant at the time.
The quiet ones. But I found out. I passed rows of cages, some full of barking, some whining, some too still. A few dogs looked up hopefully. Others didn't even bother. I made it halfway through the row before I felt the weight of it all settle in my chest. There were too many, and I wasn't ready. I turned to leave. That's when I saw him, huddled in the corner of his kennel, not making a sound, not barking for attention, just watching me. I stopped. He didn't come to the front, didn't wag,
Didn't whine.
but his eyes, they said everything. They said,
I'm tired.
I've been waiting. I don't know if you're the one, but I hope. I dropped to a crouch without thinking. He didn't flinch, just stared. And in that stare, I heard a voice, not out loud, not even in my head really,
More like in my chest.
deep down, where certainty lives. You don't have to fix me. Just don't leave. I sat there for a long time. I didn't speak. He didn't move. But something passed between us, an understanding, unspoken and undeniable. Eventually, a volunteer came over. He's been here a while,
She said gently.
doesn't do much. People skip him. I nodded. What's his name?
I asked.
She checked the chart. They called him Bear. We don't know where he came from. Picked him up during that storm 2 weeks ago.
Bear.
Didn't suit him at all. I whispered, Can I meet him outside the cage? The volunteer nodded. That afternoon, I sat on a bench in the shelter's small fenced yard, my hands shaking just a little as the gate creaked open. He stepped out, slow, careful, like the world had tricked him too many times before. He didn't come running. He walked over and sat beside me.
Didn't look at me.
Just beside me, and I knew he was mine. Not because he wagged, not because he barked or kissed my hand or danced for treats, but because he chose stillness. He chose me. I didn't fill out the paperwork that day. I needed to think, to be sure. But later, when I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about that stare. Those eyes, the voice that never made a sound, and the message that had wrapped itself around my heart. You saw me. The next day, I went back and said, I'll take him. That's the part of the story I never told Max, because I think he already knows. Now, when he looks at me, that voice is still there. Only now it says something different. You kept your promise. Some people write letters they never send. Others keep journals no one ever reads.
Me?
I think I talked to Max in 1,000 ways that have nothing to do with words and everything to do with being here. It hit me the other night, just before bed. I was brushing my teeth when I glanced into the living room and saw him lying there, legs tucked, eyes half closed, waiting for me to finish the last thing I always do before we call the day done. And I thought, how much do I say to you without ever opening my mouth? We have our rhythms now. I wake up, and before I roll out of bed, I stretch, and he mirrors me from the floor, his front paws sliding out, his head tilting, waiting for the click of my feet on the hardwood. I pour his food before I make my coffee. I let him outside first, even in the rain. I carry extra water in my tote now.
Treats too.
And an old towel in the back seat of the car. But those are just the obvious things. There are other moments, smaller, softer ones, where the love sneaks through in ways no one else would ever see. Like the way I step around his favorite spot on the rug, even when I'm in a rush. Or how I lower my voice when he's asleep. How I wait patiently when he freezes at a new sound, giving him space to sniff it out on his own. Or how I always say, good boy, even when he doesn't quite get it right. These are the notes I never write down. The kind of love letters made from gestures instead of ink. When he rests his chin on my foot, I know he's saying, I'm here, you're mine. When I turn off the lights and leave just the small lamp by the couch glowing, I'm saying, you're safe, sleep well. When I catch his eye across the room and smile without a word, he lifts his head, blinks once, and says, I saw that. And sometimes I wonder, if someone else came in and watched us for just a day, would they notice? Would they feel it? Or would they just see an old dog with a limp and a woman who talks to herself too much? They wouldn't see the way he chooses to be in the same room now, or how he snores a little louder when the windows open, like he finally trusts the night air. They wouldn't see the way he leans his shoulder into my leg on especially hard days. Just enough pressure to say, "Stay grounded." No, they wouldn't notice. But I do, because this is what love looks like when it's quiet, when it doesn't ask for attention, when it doesn't need to be named to be known. We are each other's letters now, not sealed in envelopes, not typed on a page, but in the way my shoes end up near the door because he likes lying next to them, in the soft grunt he gives when I get home late like, "You okay? Took long enough." In the paw he places on my arm when I cry, not because he understands tears, but because he understands me. These aren't notes anyone would ever read, but I read them every day, and so does he. Not every day is a good day. I wish I could say Max was healing in a perfect upward line, that every step forward stayed exactly where we left it. But trauma doesn't work like that. Not for people, not for dogs. Some mornings he forgets. He'll wake with a start, ears twitching, body coiled like something's coming for him. I'll reach out, soft, slow, and he'll flinch like I'm a stranger again. That's the worst part, I think. Not when he barks or growls or retreats, but when he looks at me like he doesn't know me anymore. Those are the days I feel helpless. Sometimes he won't eat. Sometimes he refuses to walk past certain corners. Once, he froze for 10 whole minutes at the sound of a dropped glass in the apartment above us. Just last week, a man in a dark hoodie jogged by while we were out walking. No warning, just heavy steps and the quick rush of wind. Max bolted sideways, pulling the leash so hard I stumbled. He dragged us into the bushes, cowering behind my legs, his body trembling so hard I could feel it through the leash. It took forever to calm him. I just sat down on the cold ground and waited, didn't say much, just kept my hand near him, palm up, letting him choose. Eventually, he touched his nose to it,
Gently, softly.
like a whisper. That's how I knew he was still in there. That Max, the one who sleeps with his belly showing, who lets me rub behind his ears, who wiggles when he sees my car pull in, that Max hadn't disappeared. He'd just gotten quiet again. I think that's the thing most people forget. Healing doesn't mean the fear goes away. It just means you build a life bigger than it. You build routines, safety nets. You learn how to hold space for the bad days without letting them undo the good ones. So I do what I've learned to do. I stay. On those days, I don't push him. I don't talk too much. I don't ask him to be brave. Instead, I open the curtains just a little. I warm his food an extra few seconds. I move slower around the kitchen. I play the music he likes, soft acoustic guitar, nothing sharp or sudden. And I sit. I sit near him, not touching unless he asks. And I let him come back in his own time. Some nights, he doesn't make it to the bed. He curls up near the door instead, like he needs to keep watch. I leave a blanket beside him and whisper, "I'll be here when you're ready." That's the promise I made the day I brought him home. Not that I'd fix him. Not that I'd erase the past. But that I'd stay, even when he couldn't hold on to me. His bad days are mine. Not because I suffer them, too, but because I choose to be there with him through them. It's easy to love a dog when they're wagging their tail and bouncing through the park. It's harder when they won't meet your eyes, when they won't eat, when they shake in their sleep and whimper at ghosts they can't explain. But those are the moments that matter most, because that's where trust grows. Not in the sunshine, but in the shadows. And every time Max comes back from one of those shadows, even just a little, I love him more. Not because he's perfect, but because he lets me stay. It didn't look like a big moment. Not at first. The kind of thing that, to anyone else, would barely register. No music played. The lights didn't flicker. I wasn't even paying attention when it happened. But I remember the feeling in my chest. That quiet pull. It was late. The rain had been soft all evening, like a lullaby against the windows. I had just put my mug in the sink and turned off the kitchen light. Max had been asleep for most of the night in his usual corner by the heater, curled up like a comma, safe and small. I was halfway to my room when I noticed it. He wasn't there. Not in his usual spot. I blinked, backtracked, checked the hallway. Nothing. My heart skipped. He never left that corner at night. never wandered while the lights were off. Then I saw him, in my bedroom, lying not just in the doorway, not just near the bed, but on the bed, right in the center, stretched out, not curled, not cautious, sprawled, like he'd always belonged there, like he knew he could. I froze in the doorway, hand on the frame. He looked up when he heard me, but didn't move.
Didn't flinch.
Just blinked slowly, then rested his chin back down on the pillow like this was nothing new. And I swear, I heard it in my chest. This is home, right?
I didn't cry.
Not exactly, but something in me softened so fast it felt like breaking. I walked over, sat on the edge of the bed. He shifted just enough to give me space, just enough to say, "You can stay too."
So I did.
I curled beside him gently, one hand resting on his back, his fur warm and steady under my fingers. And he sighed. Not a tired sigh, a relieved one, like this is what he'd been waiting for. Not permission, not training, just acceptance.
His own way of saying,
I choose this. I choose you.
I don't know how long we stayed like that.
Maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour. Time gets quiet in those kinds of moments. It stops keeping track. Eventually, I whispered, "I've been waiting, too." He didn't stir. He just let his weight press into the bed, into me, into this thing we had built together without even realizing it. It wasn't the first time he'd trusted me, but it was the first time he invited me into his world completely.
No words. No hesitation.
Just soft breath, shared warmth,
And peace.
the kind that doesn't need explanation, the kind that only says, "I'm safe with you. You're mine now." I added the moment to the fridge list the next morning. Slept on the bed, October 22nd.
Didn't ask.
Just knew he belonged. And underneath it, smaller.
Let me in.
Finally. Sometimes love doesn't knock on the door. Sometimes it just walks in, stretches out across your favorite blanket, and says nothing at all. Because the truth is, when it's real, you don't need words. You just know. Max stretches when I do. Every morning. It's become a kind of ritual now. Me groaning my way out from under the covers, him lifting his head from wherever he sprawled, giving me that sleepy squint like, "You again?" Then, almost in sync, we both reach. Me, arms high, fingers wide, back cracking like a bag of microwave popcorn. Him, front paws forward, chest low, tail high. That exaggerated, slow-motion stretch dogs do like they invented yoga. And every time, without fail, I say the same thing. "Good stretch, buddy." His tail thumps softly against the rug. It's small, barely a moment, but I think we both look forward to it, because now it feels like ours. There was a time when mornings were quiet in a different way, lonely, like the silence after a party that ended before it began. I'd wake, check my phone, make coffee, sit in the hush of the apartment, and pretend that was enough.
But now?
Now there's breathing. Now there's motion. Now there's that quiet little dance we do just to start the day. Sometimes I wonder if he waits for it, the way I do. If he lies there in the dark, just listening for the rustle of my blanket or the first creak of the floorboard, thinking, "Here we go again." He doesn't jump on me, doesn't lick my face or bounce around like in those videos of dogs acting like toddlers.
Max is calmer than that.
Older, maybe, or just careful. But he shows up. Every morning. Every stretch. And it fills a part of me I didn't know was empty. After our morning stretch, there's the coffee dance. Not a real dance, of course, but that routine we've perfected where he waits patiently near the kitchen doorway, not in the way, never too close, while I make my sacred first cup. It started early on, when he used to be unsure about the clinks and gurgles and beeps, the sounds of the kettle, the way the cupboard doors snapped shut. All of it used to make him flinch. Now he watches me with the calm of someone who's seen it 1,000 times. Like he's thinking, ah yes, the human bean juice ritual. When I open the fridge for creamer, he stands. When I stir the mug and take the first sip, he walks to the back door and sits, ready for our little stroll. Again, not big things, but things that matter. Things that mean we're living this life together. There's a quote I once read, something like, What is happiness but a string of small pleasures? And I didn't get it at the time. I thought happiness had to be big,
Loud.
unforgettable. But lately I've started to think maybe it's just this. The quiet things, the warm mug, the morning stretches, the soft thump of his tail against the rug when I say his name with a smile in my voice. I keep writing them down, too. Not in the fridge list anymore. That's for the milestones. But in my phone under a note called Little Things. Today's entry. Waited by the door, tail wagging, when I sang in the shower, badly. Let me tuck the blanket around him like a burrito.
Stayed that way.
Sneezed 4 times in a row and looked personally offended. Caught him wagging in his sleep. Smiled like a dope. No one else would care. But I do. Because when love is real, it doesn't need to be grand. It just needs to show up. Like he does. Every morning. Right on time. Stretch and all. It started with one sock. A blue one. Fuzzy. Fresh out of the dryer. I just dropped a warm pile of laundry onto the couch when I turned around to grab a hanger. And when I turned back, Max was trotting out of the room, head high, with the sock dangling from his mouth, like a prize. He didn't chew it. Didn't tear it up. Just took it. Casual.
Bold.
Almost smug. I blinked. Hey. I called, half laughing. Where do you think you're going? Max didn't answer, of course. Just paused in the hallway, glanced back at me with that mischievous glint I hadn't seen before, and trotted a little faster. Oh, you're kidding, I muttered, dropping the hanger and chasing after him. He ducked behind the armchair. I went left. He went right. And for the next minute, we danced around the living room like 2 kids playing tag. I wasn't really trying to catch him, and he wasn't really trying to get away. We both knew what we were doing, just enough chaos to make it fun. When I finally scooped the sock from his mouth, he didn't fight me, just sat there, tail wagging, tongue lolling out, clearly proud of himself. You're a thief, I told him. Max just tilted his head, tongue hanging like punctuation. I couldn't help but laugh. And that was it, the beginning of the sock heist. Now it's become a game. I'll pretend to fold laundry, and he'll pretend not to notice. Then, like clockwork, he'll wander over, sniff around innocently, and, with dramatic flair, grab one sock and make a break for it. Sometimes I chase him. Sometimes I just watch from the couch as he parades around like a champion. He never takes 2, never chews, never hides them, just carries them like trophies. I've tried offering toys instead.
Balls.
Stuffed animals. Even squeaky things shaped like squirrels. He's not interested. Only socks. Mine specifically. And always the soft ones. I think it's less about the object and more about what it means. A ritual. A joke. A tiny rebellion wrapped in fabric. And maybe, just maybe, a way of saying, I feel safe enough to be silly. I remember the first time I realized he was playing. Really playing. Not just existing. Not just surviving. But actually voluntarily doing something pointless and joyful. It wasn't about food or fear or routine. It was fun. And that changed something in me. Because dogs like Max, rescues with shadows in their pasts, they don't always get that. They don't always know they're allowed to be goofy. And when they do, it's magic. It's healing in a language you can't explain to anyone else. One morning, I couldn't find my sock. I was late for work. Hair half dried, coffee half drunk, shoes already on. Where is it? I muttered, tossing pillows, digging under the laundry basket. Then I turned and saw Max sitting at the edge of the hallway, tail wagging slowly. And there it was, in his mouth, the missing sock. Max, I said, trying not to laugh. Seriously? He trotted over and placed it directly in my hand. No chase. No game. Just a delivery. Like he was saying, I know you needed it, but I needed to remind you I'm still funny. I hugged him, socks and all. That night, I added to my little things list on my phone. The sock game continues. No survivors. All stolen. All returned with pride. Laughed so hard today, I dropped a whole basket of clean clothes. He was proud. Let him win today. Maybe he let me win too. Because love doesn't always look like epic gestures. Sometimes, it looks like a stolen sock and a tail that thumps when you laugh. The rain started sometime before dawn. Not a storm, just that steady, slow kind of rain that taps against the windows like it has nowhere else to be. The kind that turns the world gray and soft and sleepy. I knew right away it was going to be a stay inside kind of day. Max did too. Usually, when I wake, he's already at the door, stretching, tail flicking, waiting for the leash. But not today. Today, he stayed curled in a loose circle near the bed, blinking at me like, "We're not seriously going out in that, are we?" I yawned.
No, Buddy.
"We're not." And just like that, we both silently agreed it was a rainy day. We've got rules for days like this. Unspoken, of course, but solid as any contract. Rule number 1. Everything moves slower. Breakfast gets made in slow motion. I let the kettle boil twice. Max takes his time sniffing every inch of his food before eating. Rule number 2. The couch is a shared kingdom. Normally, Max curls up on the rug or next to the door, watching the outside world do its thing. But on rainy days, he claims one end of the couch, and I claim the other. He gets the throw blanket. I get the fuzzy socks. We meet somewhere in the middle, knees to tail. Rule number 3. No guilt allowed. We don't should ourselves. I don't tell myself I should be doing laundry or catching up on emails. Max doesn't try to impress me with tricks or extra walks. We just exist. Quietly, side by side. I read half a book before noon. He snored through most of it, his soft breathing louder than the rain. When I shifted to grab my tea, his head flopped against my shin like a weighted pillow.
No fuss.
Just an I'm here kind of nudge. I didn't move for another hour, and I didn't mind, because this kind of stillness, this shared silence, it fills a different kind of space. When I didn't know I was missing before he came. At some point, I played music. Just soft guitar stuff, instrumentals, nothing too sharp or busy. Max opened one eye, then closed it again. Later, I caught him watching the window, tracking the raindrops. They slid down the glass in lazy races. He followed each one like a slow-motion chase, ears twitching now, and then like he was narrating the whole thing in his head. I whispered, "Who's going to win, huh?" In my head, I heard him answer, "Number 4's got it. Look at that drip form." I smiled. Rainy day rule number 4. We make up conversations, but we don't need to say them out loud. By late afternoon, I made us both a little treat. Hot chocolate for me. A frozen banana bite for him. Something I'd made weeks ago and almost forgotten about. He took it gently, tail wagging once, twice, then sat beside me while I sipped my mug and watched nothing at all out the window. And honestly, it felt perfect. Not exciting, not groundbreaking, but enough. Sometimes I think these days are the ones I'll remember most. Not the ones with big adventures or photo-worthy moments, but the quiet ones. The ones where nothing happens except being together. As the sun dipped behind the rain clouds, I turned off the lights and lit a single candle, just for ambience. Max lifted his head, blinked at the flickering glow, then sighed and settled back down. I reached out and scratched behind his ears. "Thanks for being boring with me," I said softly. He didn't move, didn't even open his eyes, but his tail thumped once against the couch. In Max speak, that meant, "Best day ever." Little things note, typed with one hand. Max watched the rain like it was telling him a secret. We both napped.
Twice.
I think his dreams were happy ones. Mine too. It happened on a Tuesday. A nothing special, midweek, slightly too cold, reheated leftovers kind of day. I was in the living room trying to do something responsible. Pay bills, maybe organize that one drawer that swallows pens and receipts and half the batteries in the world. Max was nearby, curled up like usual, his chin resting on his front paws, eyes drifting in and out of focus. Background dog. Peaceful presence. My shadow. And then it happened. A sneeze. But not a regular sneeze. Not even a cute dog sneeze. This was an event. It came out of nowhere. Loud, explosive, followed immediately by a thump and a soft, confused grunt. I looked up. Max was standing in the middle of the rug, blinking like someone had just hit rewind on his whole brain. His ears were halfway flipped backward, his eyes wide, and somehow, he had sneezed himself right out of his cozy posture and onto his butt. Not a full fall, just a surprise sit. His tail was trapped under one leg. His front paw was still mid-step. He looked completely baffled by what his own body had just done. And the way he blinked at me, like, "Did you see that? Was that me?" I lost it. Not just a chuckle, not just a smile. I burst out laughing, loud, uncontrollable. Throw your head back, can't breathe kind of laughter. It felt like shaking loose something I didn't know was stuck inside me. Max tilted his head, clearly confused at first. Then something shifted. He wagged his tail. Just a little, then more. And I swear his eyes sparkled. Like he knew, like he realized he'd caused it.
The joy, the sound, the release.
And he liked it. He bounced once. Just a tiny hop of his front feet. His version of a celebration. Then he did it again, more awkwardly this time, like he wasn't sure how his legs worked but was willing to try anyway. That made me laugh harder. Now he was in full clown mode, pacing in circles, tossing his head, grabbing one of his toys and flinging it halfway across the room, then running after it like a kid who had just discovered sprinting. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't coordinated. It was perfect. And I laughed through every second. Afterward, we both collapsed on the couch, me still breathless, him panting like he'd just run a marathon. He rested his paw on my knee. I rested my head against the back cushion, still smiling. It had been so long since I'd laughed like that. Not a polite laugh at a meme. Not the social laugh you give someone at work to be nice, but the kind that shakes you, that reminds you your ribs are real, that reminds you your heart still knows how to be light. And it came from a sneeze. A sneeze, a thump, and a dog who forgot how his own legs worked. Later that night, I typed into my little things list. Sneezed himself into next week. Looked personally offended by physics. I laughed so hard I cried. First time in, I don't know, a long time. He made a sound halfway between a snort and a cough and looked proud of it. My cheeks hurt. I didn't care. It's funny. You spend so much time focused on healing the dog, on making them feel safe and loved and home, that you don't even realize you're healing too, until one sneeze knocks the sadness loose. And suddenly you're laughing like someone just gave you back a piece of yourself. Maybe Max didn't mean to be funny. Or maybe, just maybe, he did. Maybe love finds ways to speak, even when it sounds like a sneeze and ends with a tail-chasing victory lap. It was barely past 6 p.m. when I turned the key in the lock. Nothing special about the day, just work, errands, traffic, the usual gray edges of a weekday. I wasn't expecting anything. Usually when I get home, Max is curled up somewhere. On the couch, by the hallway, near the window. Relaxed. Quiet. Not indifferent exactly, but definitely not waiting. That had always been fine with me. He was independent. Still learning. Still adjusting. But that day, he was at the door. Sitting. Just sitting. Ears perked. Tail gently wagging. Like he knew. I froze for half a second in the doorway. And he just looked at me.
No barking. No whining. No humping.
Just presence. And something in my chest cracked open. I dropped my bag and knelt down. He came forward slowly, confidently, and placed his head under my chin. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't even long, but in Max's quiet, measured way, it was everything. Because this wasn't just about routine. It was choice. He'd waited for me. You don't realize how much it means to be missed until someone waits at the door just to say, "You were gone. I noticed. I'm glad you're back." And when that someone is a dog who once flinched at footsteps and avoided eye contact. It's a thunderclap dressed in silence. I don't know what changed that day. Maybe he'd heard my car pull up. Maybe he'd watched the clock somehow, like dogs seem to do. Maybe he'd smelled my shoes still sitting by the door and thought, she's been gone too long. Or maybe he'd finally decided this place wasn't just a stop along the way. Maybe it was home. Maybe I was his person now. After that day, he started doing it more often. Not Every single time, he's still Max after all. Still calm, still reserved in his own regal way. But some days, especially when I'm running late or when it's been an extra long shift, I'll turn the knob. And there he is,
Sitting.
waiting, wagging. And when I walk in and say, "Hey you," he blinks slowly, sometimes steps forward and bumps his nose into my leg like he's saying, "Don't do that again."
Not in a panicked way.
Not desperate, just tethered. And honestly, I didn't know how much I needed that. We always talk about how much we rescue our dogs. But the truth? Sometimes they rescue us right back. Not with grand gestures, but with moments like this. Quiet, consistent, gentle acts of love that say, "You matter. I noticed you were gone. I missed you." That night, I added to the little things list. Waited by the door. Just sat. Just knew. First time ever. Felt like he reached across some invisible line and pulled me in. No words, but the message was clear. You're mine too. I told myself not to cry. I did anyway. Not the heavy kind. Just a few soft tears as I sat with him on the floor, my coat still on, my heart wide open. He leaned a shoulder into mine and sighed. And it felt like coming home for both of us.